Hello again, folks. This is George Shears back with Chapter 8 of A Modern Pilgrim's Progress, my long journey in discovering non-duality. If you've missed the previous chapters to this story, you'll find all of them on my YouTube channel along with this chapter. So here we go. It was via Ram Dass that my formative long foray into Buddha Dharma began. I learned through him in 1975 that Joseph Goldstein, Jack Kornfield, and Sharon Salzberg had conjointly offered an introductory course in Vipassana meditation at Naropa Institute in Colorado shortly after their return from Southeast Asia. They had all spent several years there immersing themselves in Theravadan Buddhism. Again, through the nudging of inner guidance, I then immediately ordered the recorded audio cassettes from that course. I had become slightly aware of this form of meditation through Ram Dass, but I didn't know anyone who actually engaged in it. Utilizing the cassette tapes as my only guidance, I then started learning the rudiments of this classic form of meditation to the best of my ability. Through this wise choice, I quickly recognized that in nearly all of my supposedly quote-unquote waking moments, I was caught up in compulsive, automatic thinking about the past or future, and very rarely simply savoring the present moment. In other words, I was compulsively quote-unquote doing instead of just being. This motivated me strongly to reverse, or at least weaken, this pernicious habit. It also became a key gateway to the Buddha's liberating wisdom that I then became immersed in for many more years. Around this same time, in June of 1975, I advanced professionally by becoming the group therapy supervisor at Abbott Northwestern Hospital in Minneapolis, Minnesota, thanks to another Maine mentor, Dr. Shirley Mink, who was impressed by my therapeutic innovations at Hastings State Hospital. About 3 years later, I met Tom Traven, another psychologist, who had been personally mentored by His Holiness Sakya Trizin, the highly esteemed leader of one of the 4 main schools of Tibetan Buddhism. His Holiness had commissioned Tom to start a Sakya Center in the Twin Cities, of which Mildred and I became founding members. With a highly accomplished Tibetan Lama Dejung Rinpoche as our abbot, Sakya Tupten Darge Ling took form, and, much like a candle flickering in a strong wind, persisted through many challenges for the next decade, during the last part of which I was its acting leader. Mildred and I had the rare privilege of Dejun Rinpoche bestowing upon us Tibetan names: Sakya Dandup, quote-unquote Buddha Siddhartha for me, and Yeshi Wangmo, quote-unquote strong woman, for Mildred. During the summer of 1980, Mildred and I were again honored by Dejun Rinpoche and his brother Dr. Nima, a Tibetan physician, being our house guests for a month. Our daughter Michelle, who was 11 at that time, resonated to them deeply, so much so that a few years later, she had the sacred Tibetan mantra Om Mani Padme Hum in Tibetan script tattooed on one of her upper arms. For the next 6 years, I became immersed in Tibetan Tantric, in parentheses, Mahayana Buddhism, while continuing a solo practice of Vipassana, Theravada Buddhist meditation, aka quote-unquote mindfulness. In 1986, the first Vipassana teachers finally reached the Twin Cities. One of them, Shinzen Young, became my main teacher for the next several years. During this era, I attended several meditation retreats lasting from 3 to 10 days. Here's a photo of Dr. Nima, Daishin Rinpoche, and Mildred in our living room at Bruce Avenue and in Roseville, Minnesota in 1980. Daishin Rinpoche at that time was in his early 70s. He had begun meditating at age 7 in Tibet before the Chinese takeover, well before that. And he was able to escape from Tibet and actually became one of the very first lamas to immigrate to the United States. And he, along with his brother, Dr. Nima, and he was a resident then of Seattle for the next several years. And he was truly a very, very seasoned meditator. He had been meditating at that point for well over 60 years, virtually all of his waking moments. And it was truly a great honor to have had this contact with him. I have no doubt that if anyone has achieved so-called enlightenment, Daishin Rinpoche was one of those folks. So this will end chapter 8, and I will continue again in chapter 9. Thanks so much for watching and listening.